Have you ever wondered how far a government might go to justify a war? Let's take a step back in time to the height of the Cold War, 1962, when the United States was embroiled in a tense standoff with the socialist regime of Cuba. This was the backdrop for a proposed false flag operation known as Operation Northwoods. These proposals called for CIA operatives to both stage and commit acts of terrorism against American military and civilian targets. The possibilities detailed in this operation included the remote control of civilian aircraft, which would secretly be repainted as a U.S. Air Force plane and then shot down off the coast of Cuba, the possible assassination of Cuban immigrants, sinking boats of Cuban refugees on the high seas, and blowing up a U.S. ship and orchestrating terrorism in many U.S. cities. The proposals were thankfully rejected by President John F. Kennedy. Conceived by the U.S. Department of Defense, this operation called for the CIA to stage and/or commit these terrorist attacks on American soil. They felt this would create public support for a war against Cuba. They would blame the Cuban government for terrorist acts that would be perpetrated by the U.S. government. Operation Northwoods proposals also recommended hijackings and bombings, followed by the introduction of false evidence that would implicate the Cuban government. Several other proposals were included within Operation Northwoods, such as real or simulated actions against various U.S. military and civilian targets. The operation recommended developing a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, other Florida cities, and even in Washington. This involved the bombing of civilian targets. This would also to be blamed on the Cuban government, in order to paint a false image of Fidel Castro and to misinform the American public. The plan was drafted by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, signed by Chairman Lyman Lemnitzer, and sent to the Secretary of Defense. Although part of the U.S. government's anti-communist Cuban project, Operation Northwoods was never officially accepted. It was authorized by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but then rejected by President Kennedy as mentioned earlier. None of the false flag operations became active under Operation Northwoods. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The idea of your own government plotting against its people to justify a military offensive. Unfortunately, this was a real plan, drafted by the highest ranks of the U.S. military. The previously secret document was originally made public on November 18, 1997, by the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board. A total of 1,521 pages of once secret military records, covering 1962 to 1964, were declassified by said review board. Northwoods' document were first published online by the National Security Archive on November 6, 1998, in a joint venture with CNN. To understand all of this, we need to take a step back and look at the early 1960s, the period when this operation was proposed. The Cuban Revolution, led by Fidel Castro, had recently ousted the pro-American government, and Castro's open alignment with the Soviet Union had made him a significant threat in the eyes of American policymakers. The U.S. military, under the leadership of General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, believed that a war with Cuba could be justified if the American public was convinced that Cuba posed a direct threat to American lives. Since it would seem desirable to use legitimate provocation as the basis for U.S. military intervention in Cuba, a cover and deception was in order. A series of well-coordinated incidents were planned to take place in and around Guantanamo to give genuine appearance of being done by hostile Cuban forces. The United States would respond by executing offensive operations to secure water and power supplies, destroying artillery and mortar emplacements which threatened the base. The perceived threat from Cuba was seen as part of a larger global conflict, and the military believed that extraordinary measures were needed to counteract it. It's essential to remember that this was a time when the domino theory was in full effect. The belief that if one country fell to communism, its neighbors would soon follow. The Cold War was a time of extreme measures, and Operation Northwoods was the epitome of this mindset. What stopped this plan from becoming a reality? Well, it was the determined stance of one man, President John F. Kennedy. Operation Northwoods, despite its calculated design, was met with a firm rejection from President Kennedy. He outrightly dismissed the proposal, which was a testament to his conviction to uphold American values and principles over expediency and machinations. This decision wasn't without its consequences. In a swift move, Kennedy removed Chairman Lemnitzer from his position. This action sent a clear message to the military establishment and beyond that such deceptive and violent operations had no place in the conduct of American affairs. President Kennedy exercised his power and used a more thoughtful approach to check the military, preventing a potentially disastrous operation from being carried out. It was a demonstration of the power of ethical leadership. The revelation of Operation Northwoods shocked the public and the media alike, leading to a wave of disbelief and a re-evaluation of US foreign policy during the Cold War era. It was a chilling reminder of how far the government was willing to go during one of the most tense periods in world history. A rude awakening, if you will, in the name of national security. The declassification of the document led to widespread debate about the ethics and boundaries of covert operations. It sparked conversations about the balance between national security and individual rights, a topic that remains relevant even today. And in actuality, it was the release of a book titled Body of Secrets by investigative reporter James Bamford in 2001 that brought the operation into the broader public consciousness. The declassification of Operation Northwoods, albeit decades later, was a crucial step towards transparency, shedding light on a dark chapter of US history. It served as a reminder of the power of information and the importance of critical thinking, especially in the face of authority. What was the public's reaction to learning about Operation Northwoods once they found out in totality? That's quite complicated also. It's important to note that the existence of Operation Northwoods wasn't immediately known to the public. It was a secret that lay dormant for decades, locked away in the annals of government archives. As mentioned earlier, it wasn't until the year 2001 that Operation Northwoods was thrust into the public eye with James Bamford's book. For the first time, the public was given a glimpse into the operations that had been considered by their government during the Cold War era. The revelation was, to put it mildly, a shocker. The public reaction was a mixture of disbelief, outrage, and intense debate. It raised questions about the measures a government should be allowed to take in the name of national security. It challenged the public's trust in their leaders and forced them to grapple with the uncomfortable reality of their history. And so, even today, Operation Northwoods remains a hot topic of discussion. It's a controversial chapter in US history that serves as a stark reminder of the fine line between national security and ethical conduct. It's a reminder that, in the pursuit of security, we must never lose sight of our humanity. What can we learn from Operation Northwoods? The answer to that question lies not in the pages of a secret proposal, but in the very fabric of our society. So what do you think? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching.